we've got some bad news in the psychedelic world. This, with MAPS and Lycos, just the drain a lot like legal cannabis, you guys.
Oh, boy.
Maybe there's a lesson here. Maybe we should all start paying attention and listening. Bad news for psychedelic drug company. FDA expands probe after rejection. More bad news for the company behind an experimental MDMA therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder, which the Food and Drug Administration roundly rejected earlier this month. According to a report from the Wall Street Journal, the FDA is now expanding an investigation into clinical trials behind the experimental psychedelic therapy, even though the agency has already rejected it. Agency investigators reportedly interviewed 4 additional people last week asking questions regarding whether the trial's underreported side effects. People involved in the trial had previously alleged, among other things, that effects such as suicidal thoughts went undocumented. Trial participants were discouraged from reporting them to bolster the chances of FDA approval. Overall, the MDMA trials faced crushing criticism amid the FDA's review, with outside experts and advisors calling out allegations of sexual misconduct at one trial site, as well as flaws in overall trial designs, multiple sources of biases, and claims that the company behind the therapy, Lycos, fostered a cult-like belief in psychedelics. Odd scandalous trials tank FDA According to the Journal, the recent interviews were being conducted by the FDA's Office of Regulatory Affairs, which oversees inspections. A subdivision of that office called Biomedical Research Monitoring Program, which works to ensure the quality and integrity of data submitted to FDA. Lycos has already laid off 75% of its staff and is overhauling its leadership, including Rick Doblin leaving the company. Moves were in response to the FDA's rejections, the company said. Additionally, a scientific journal retracted 3 of the company's studies, citing protocol violations amounting to unethical conduct. Underpinning the allegations and criticisms against Lycos are its roots in drug advocacy. Lycos is a commercial spinoff of the psychedelic advocacy nonprofit Multiple Disciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. For decades, MAPS has worked to legalize psychedelics and research their use as potential treatments, particularly for mental health conditions, PTSD, anxiety, and substance use disorders. MAPS was founded by Rick Doblin, longtime psychedelic activist and advocate who openly believes the use of psychedelics will lead to world peace. Amid the leadership overhaul this month, Doblin left his position. Lycos didn't respond to ours request for a comment. In response to the Journal, a company spokesman said that Lycos is committed to engaging with the FDA and addressing any questions that it raises. The spokesperson also noted that the company is planning to meet with the FDA about the rejection, which it is appealing. Trial participants and outsiders have levied heavy criticism against it. Will likely be hard to move. Prospect of a therapy cult guiding a suggestibility-enhancing drug through clinical trials highlights unique risks that have been publicly discussed. S. Deveneaux, a Johns Hopkins University senior lecturer in the university's writing program, focuses on the issues of drugs in society, said in public comments prior to the FDA rejection. Trials should be scrutinized as if Scientology or Nexium had submitted a new drug application to the FDA. Those public comments appeared in a damning report for the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review, which concluded that there was insufficient evidence to back current MDMA-based therapy. According to the Journal report, Deveneaux was among the people interviewed by the FDA investigators. Lycos' saga has been a blow to the psychedelic community in general and to many patients, particularly veterans, who reported benefits from using MDMA to treat PTSD, a condition in desperate need of effective treatments. This is horrid. It's such a disappointment to see this man Rick Doblin and his company first off spin off Lycos, which is a for-profit company from a specifically not-for-profit public policy organization. It's sad to watch them drop the ball and be shaky and shoddy in their research, that they jeopardized your psychedelic research for MDMA as well as other chemicals. And at the same time, this speaks to the fact that this whole thing is just one of the most moronic, stupidest things ever. Should continue to use psychedelics and express and explore our consciousness without any regard for the okay or the approval of governing bodies. Our consciousness is ourselves. We are sovereign beings who are born on this earth free, and we give away our freedom to these mafias that have basically called themselves as vampires and leeches on us. And so I would just say everything about this story is sad to me. I would have liked to see really high levels of academic and intellectual rigor in these trials, and we didn't see them. However, it doesn't mute or blunt the success that therapists have been having with MDMA since its discovery and repopularization in the 60s. there are, in fact, underground rings of psychotherapists on the West Coast and elsewhere that are using MDMA in couples and other therapy to very, very high efficacy. So while this isn't bad for the substances themselves, this is definitely a slowdown for us. Again, it's the same thing in the weed and community as it is in this community. I'm asking the government permission or your consciousness or in charge of you, and I'm really excited and interested to hear what Jason, Yarrow, and Jenny guys have to add to this. So let's all pile in here on this Monday. Germain for Height 9.
These guys so screwed the pooch on this, bro. I think they sent psychedelics back about 10 to 15 years because of their actions with.
Well, let's say they sent psychedelic legalization back. Psychedelics are fine.
Okay, fair point. Fair point. I can see what you're saying with that.
It's totally winning, bro. Ask me about the weekend.
Oh boy.
I'll tell you.
Oh boy.
Oh God.
Boy. Yarrow, any thoughts on this, Yarrow?
Yeah, we can't paint with too broad of a brush with these Paisley pioneers because they do not represent the industry. They represent a particular company, and it is true that they're a spinoff from MAPS, and MAPS has been kind of the 800-pound gorilla
it's their for-profit
in the room. But here's the place where I just want to get a little bit granular. In the article, it talks about some things that I think are relevant. First of all, I don't see the FDA investigating as a bad thing. I think rigorous transparency and accountability is the way systems are designed to work best for, as intended. It says that people involved in the trial have previously alleged, amongst other things, that ill effects such as suicidal thoughts went undocumented, and trial participants were discouraged from reporting them to bolster the chances of FDA approval. If that's true, somebody should be held accountable for that. And the other thing around the sexual misconduct, I mean, you just throw that in and all of a sudden it gets real scandalous real quick. However, there are some places where I think maybe this is a bit too expansive and overreaching. For example, it says, as well as flaws in overall trial design. So those trial designs are provided to the FDA when you provide your results. And so that's something the FDA probably already was privy to. And then it says multiple sources of bias and claim that the company behind the therapy, Lykos, fostered a cult-like belief in psychedelics. That seems a bit intangible. Like, I'm not really feeling that. I don't think I need the FDA to investigate whether a company had a cult-like belief. That company is based on the idea that there is an outcome that hasn't yet been proven by Western medicine and science, and that they're going to try to find a way to get there given the data-driven methods that are acceptable to the government. I don't think that creates a cult. Nobody's drinking Kool-Aid. That part seems like they're kind of trying to make it more scandalous than it really is. So I think the critical element here is, A, this is not the industry, it's a company. And B, with new industries like we saw with cannabis, there will always be people who come in because they see this nascent emerging opportunity. They brush outside the lines. They do some things that weren't okay. And if those people get caught for that and they're held accountable, then to me, that means the system works.
I think the frustrating part is watching something that came from a not-for-profit organization spin off a for-profit company. That makes things look disingenuous. And MAPS has been doing good work for a very long time. And I feel like this is a black eye on the work that has been done. I also will push back a little bit on the... What?
I said, I feel like MAPS is done. I feel like they totally tarnished their whole reputation on everything.
And that might be, but I also want to push back to, before we get kind of off of it, on the cult-like portion. Now, unfortunately, there are bad people in the world, and the same kind of people who will use sexual misconduct when people are in psychedelic states are the same kind of people who will be like, let's go do a ayahuasca retreat, let's go do this, get people on drugs, and then try to foster this false sense of community, which is kind of it's cult-like. And what it is, it's manipulation. It's using something that should be a beautiful substance that helps people, enriches their lives, did wonders for me with PTSD and anxiety, and using that to manipulate, control people for your own financial benefit. That is what I feel like they probably were referring to when they were saying a cult-like culture and things like that. And those aren't the people that you want to be stewards of any plant medicine or any.
I want to yes and what Jenny's saying. Two things. Number one, especially about the Lykos, he didn't talk about or institute or invent Lykos until they were well into the FDA trial system, which I think is disingenuous, because MAPS for decades that they would always be not for profit, and then tried to continue to claim that because they made a separate company that was aligned that they were still not for profit. They literally used their pole position in these trials to then get an exclusive for MDMA, and I think that was, I agree with Jenny, that was completely disingenuous. And secondarily, Jenny's other point that she made that's very salient, that's why continuing existing indigenous traditions have a line between curanderismo and sorcerism. And curanderismo, or healing psychedelics, is where you get out of the way, you are laser focused on your own integrity and work, and you create a space that is absent of as much as it can be of your ego and manipulation for other people to heal themselves. Whereas sorcery is using psychedelics and your own personal power for your ego aggrandizement over other people. And I think some of that gets lost when we look to medicalize these things, that there is actually a spiritual component, and there are components of this that don't fit into our current Western scientific medical models, really are true and exist. And one of the things that we risk is having outcomes like this when we don't look at the fullness of what is actually going on with. Appreciate you for everything you're saying, Jen. Right on.
Fair enough.
Indeed, Matthew.
Fair enough. And as I said, I think MAPS really got a black eye with their name, and I don't know how many people are going to take them seriously next time they're trying to raise money or funds to do the positive work that they did for this. I feel like.
Well, you know, the other issue is that MAPS was supposed to be working to make MDMA legal. Period. And then what they're doing is instituting a model where it's going to cost you $10,000 to $15,000. Or you get your insurance company to pay for it.
Yep.
And that's just, again, that's going against what psychedelics are about and what the culture has always been about. Psychedelics engender a culture, or should, when done correctly with the right intention, sharing of community, and just throwing, another thing that you have to have, a 6-figure plus job in order to have access to is not the way for this. It has to be other ways where people, especially those who have been most preyed upon by our current capitalist system, can access these substances for their own healing. What are we just going to try to heal the rich? I mean, if so, let's get a mulcher together and just, like I keep saying, let's just start the death squads. We're not going to help anybody. Let's just start the death squads, and we can just murder everybody who makes under a certain amount or is homeless, and we can just live our capitalist fever dream.